I'm interested in what you describe as poverty consciousness and how we reclaim God's abundance. So, how do we connect with the spirit of abundance and manifest abundance on every level?
Okay, the company of heaven has given us very clear understanding of what created this in the first place. And our experience, our purpose and reason for being in a third dimensional physical reality is that our Father, Mother God invested us with the creative faculties of thought and feeling and the gift of free will. And our purpose for coming into a physical reality was to learn how to use our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings and our gift of free will to expand the borders of the kingdom of heaven, to learn how to create greater and greater expressions of divinity by observing all of the patterns of perfection in the causal body of God, and then through our unique perceptions and understanding, creating new, previously unknown expressions of divinity. So in order for us to do that, there was a covenant, because there's always a balance, there's always a give and take. We have our gift of love, we have our gift of life, the life force that beats our heart, and everything that we need to sustain our physical bodies. So we have to give something back. So the covenant was that our Father, Mother God would direct the elemental kingdom. There are 3 life waves evolving on this planet. There's the human kingdom, which we belong to, the sons and daughters of God. They're the angelic kingdom, which are the messengers of God that assist us and protect us and assist us through this earthly sojourn. And there is the elemental kingdom. And the elemental kingdom is a life wave that is responsible, the divine intelligence of the elemental beings are responsible for absorbing unformed primal light and manifesting it into physical manifestation. In other words, the earth, the air, the water, the fire, the ethers, and all of the things that we need for physical manifestation, which includes the elements within our bodies, the elements of earth, the water, the sun, the air, and everything that we need to exist in a physical reality. Our Father, Mother God directed the elemental kingdom to provide everything that we would need to sustain our physical bodies in the physical plane. And they would use unformed primal light to manifest our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings in a tangible reality so that we could see what we were co-creating. And in return, and our Father, Mother God would give us our life force, the light that goes through our acupuncture meridians, that beats our heart, activates our brain, and our life force that we exist in this physical plane that keeps our God self alive in the car we drive, which is our physical, etheric, mental, and emotional bodies. So our part of the covenant, in other words, God's part of the covenant, was that everything we needed to sustain our physical bodies would be provided, and our part of the covenant would be that we would use this life force that sustains our physical body to, through our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings, to expand the borders of the kingdom of heaven on earth. In other words, to add to the light of the world. And in order for us to maintain this part of the covenant, there was one commandment given, and that was, do not partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because in other time frames, some of our sisters and brothers had chosen to use their gift of life to partake of that tree of knowledge of good and evil in ways that created negative patterns instead of what we were supposed to be creating. So our Father, Mother God knew that if we didn't tap in to the human miscreations that had been created in other dimensions involving disease and poverty and war and hatred, if we knew nothing about that, if none of that was in our consciousness, then we wouldn't manifest it in the physical plane because it wouldn't be part of what we were thinking about or feeling or energizing. But there was a point in time, and I won't go into all of that here, but I've described it very clearly on the website and in some of my books and things like that on what created. There was a point in time when we began experimenting with our gift of life, creating things that ultimately manifested as negative thoughts, words, actions, and feelings in the physical plane. So this began reflecting on the elemental kingdom. The elemental kingdom had to start out picturing those negative patterns. This is why it was said in the allegory of Adam and Eve that once they partook of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were cast from the Garden of Eden, banished, began experiencing plagues, famines, pestilence, pain and suffering, and all of those kind of things. So as we began reflecting these negative patterns on the elemental kingdom, we did start manifesting inclement weather conditions that did result in famines and plagues and pestilence and lack and limitation. So then we started developing this fear-based consciousness that there's not enough. So we started hoarding and developing into tribes and things like that, creating this poverty consciousness, believing that we didn't have enough. And we started developing this fear-based, fragmented consciousness known as our human ego. And so our human ego started feeling that anything it needed to do to get what it needed to sustain its physical body, lie, cheat, steal, kill, was appropriate. So we've been in this snowball of this negativity. So now we've deteriorated into this place where we, for one thing, don't believe there's enough, and we are struggling from morning till night because we've created this monetary system, working in often difficult, tedious jobs for a meager existence, using our life force to work in jobs from morning till night, to buy food, to put a roof over our head, clothing on, to sustain our physical bodies. In other words, we are using our life force to work all day long to get enough money to pay for the things that was God's covenant that God originally gave us for free. So we have created this block. As long as our life force, our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings are being used to purchase things to sustain our physical bodies, we have created a block that prevents God's infinite abundance from flowing into our lives. This is what has to shift. So what this means, this isn't this monumental thing that has to take place. It's really a slight shift in our awareness. We, of course, have gotten in this monetary system, so we need to work and we need to make money and we need to pay for the things that sustain our physical bodies right now. So as we receive that money, we need to bless it, we need to be grateful for it, but we need to realize that in addition to what we are doing to sustain our physical bodies, we need to start doing things that are adding to the light of the world. And there are myriad things we can do to do that. You know, we can invoke the light of God, we can pray, we can do meditations, we can do service. You know, sending love and gratitude for a beautiful sunset is adding to the light of the world. We can be in nature. There are myriad things we can do with our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings every day that are adding to the light of the world, which is going to help and is going to be shifting us out of poverty consciousness. But the key to that for our financial freedom is that since we have developed a monetary system, like attracts like, and in order to be financially free and to have prosperity in our life, we need money in our lives. So in addition to the money that we are sending out to sustain our physical bodies, which is everything that we pay for to keep living and moving forward in this physical plane, in addition to that, we need to use a portion of our money to add to the light of the world. And this, I believe, is probably where the concept of tithing came from. But we have been so ripped off and so abused and beaten down into this worthless sinner, worm in the dust consciousness that whenever we have given money to our churches or whatever, we feel very, very guilty expecting anything back in return from that. So we've created this guilt-ridden consciousness with our tithing. So we need to know, and this is always is hard for people to accept because they're saying, okay, I can't even afford to pay my bills now, and now she's telling me to give money away. But what we have to really get is that we don't have an option about this. God has already given us everything we need to sustain our physical bodies. The sun, the air, the water, the elemental kingdom providing food and shelter and clothing, all of those things. So we've already accepted God's part of the covenant. Now we have to give something back in return. And if we willingly open that flow and start giving money back to whatever fills our heart that we know is adding to the light of the world, it will begin opening that flow of abundance for us. And we don't have any choice about this because this is a universal law, giving and receiving. So what's happening now, if we are not consciously and willingly adding to the light of the world by giving some of our financial sustenance back to persons, places, conditions, things in the world that we want to give to add to the light of the world, then the way we're giving back is through pain and suffering and struggling and the sweat of the brow by working in menial, unfulfilling jobs often just to put food on the table. So what I encourage people to do is to just begin experimenting with it. I don't ever teach anything that I haven't proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be true. And in the beginning, what I ask people to do is just say, if I was financially free and I wanted to add to the light of the world, what would I support? Where would I give my money? And it can be environmental things, human rights things, animal rights things, all kinds of charities, research, education. There are zillions of things out there that add to the light of the world. I know there's this real thought that it needs to be to your church and your source of God inspiration, which is wonderful as long as you can have the right attitude about that. But the reality is anything we do that is benefiting humanity and adding to the light of the world is a gift to God. So in the beginning with me, I did what most people do when they begin the experiment. I paid all my bills, and then with whatever I had left, I said, okay, where can I give this and how can I tithe this money? And the general rule is that if we give 10% of our income to add to the light of the world, it will open such a flow back into our lives that we won't be able to handle it all. So I would struggle and try to give a little here. Rarely was I actually reaching the 10% of my income. And then one time in meditation, the response was, how much do you give a server that is waiting on you in a restaurant? And I say, well, 20%. Didn't enter my mind. I have no qualms about that. I automatically give 20% of whatever the bill is. And the response was, isn't it interesting that without hesitation, you give 20% to someone who's serving you a meal? And here you are struggling to give 10% back to God for giving you your gift of life. So that was such a revelation to me that I began instantly paying God first with my income. And I'll certainly admit that initially there was a little bit of an adjustment period, but once I got in the flow of that, I have never since then not had the money I need, whether it's to fulfill my spiritual work, to pay my bills, to add to the light of the world. It has opened a flow of abundance that has been perpetual and consistent. So I encourage you to begin experimenting with this. Now, the key with this tithing needs to be our consciousness. And the attitude has to be, when you are giving money to wherever your heart is calling you, this is a gift of love that I am giving back to God in appreciation for my gift of life. And I accept and know that this is opening a flow from the universe, expanding tenfold on its return to me. And there's really no limit. You can say 1,000-fold if you want to, on its return to me. Then you automatically recognize everything coming back into your life. Consciously expect that this is the flow coming back. So you don't expect anything from the person, place, condition, or thing you're giving it to. It's no strings attached, but you just investigate to the best of your ability, knowing and believing that they are adding to the light of the world with your money. Now, if somebody takes your money and does something with it other than what you thought they were going to, that's their karmic liability, not yours. Your responsibility is that you genuinely believed that they were going to be using this money to expand the light of God in the physical plane. So you say, this is a gift of love that I am giving back to God in appreciation for my gift of life. And I accept that it is blessing life on the way, and that it is returning to me from the universe with the highest good of all concerned tenfold. Then everything that comes back into your life, if you go out to lunch with somebody and they buy your lunch and you thought you were going to buy it, send gratitude for this flow of abundance. If you have something on sale that you have to buy, accept that this is your flow of abundance. That somebody gives you something so you don't have to buy it, accept that this is your flow. All of the money, every way money is flowing back, be grateful and accepting that it's coming back to you. Then every bit of money you spend, your income, every bit of money you spend, bless that money, ask that it bless and expand the abundance of every person that touches it, even if that money is going to pay for your bodily needs, for groceries, for your car, for your transportation, for your rent, whatever it is, bless and ask that it bless everybody on its path, and then be sure that there's an amount, and I encourage you to work toward the 10% as quickly as you can, that there's a portion of your money over and above what you're spending for your bodily needs that you're donating to some place in the world, and it can be lots of different places. You don't have to give to just one thing, that is adding to the light of the world. And this is a universal law that is scientific to the letter and is fulfilling your covenant that you have already made with God to add to the light of the world.